All right, guys, your last video lesson for U.S. history course, and we're going to talk about uh, September 11th, the terrorist attacks on 9/11, and how they impacted America, and kind of take a look ahead at some of the challenges facing the United States. All right, so obviously September 11th, most of you guys should know a deliberate attack, terrorists hijacked two planes, American Airlines Flight 11, United Airlines Flight 175, and crashed them into the World Trade Center, the towers in the World Trade Center in New York City. Also, American Airlines Flight 77 was crashed into the Pentagon as well. Also, United Airlines Flight 93 crashed in a field in southwestern Pennsylvania. Most investigators believe that that crash was forced by the passengers and crew of the airplane forcing a takeover of the plane and then either crashing it or it being crashed by the terrorists instead. Obviously in New York and in Arlington, where the Pentagon is, firefighters, police officers rushed to the scene. The towers collapsed and caused thousands of deaths while Americans were glued to their television sets, of course. So all told, the four airplanes were killed, 265 dead on the airplanes. You also had, of course, World Trade Center deaths. The estimates are in the thousands. Right now, estimates say between 2,700 and 3,000 people died in the World Trade Center, and another 125 in the Pentagon. Of course, that's in addition to the 265 on the four planes that died. And of course, people in America were saddened and angered by the attacks. You know, Rudolph Giuliani kind of assumes a kind of a heroic status as the mayor of New York. He's known as America's mayor. People gave blood and donated money and clothing and food and all sorts of things. And rescue workers converged upon New York and Washington, D.C., but actually the Pentagon's in Arlington, but descended upon the Pentagon and the World Trade Center to help with the recovery and cleanup. All right, so it becomes known that Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda are responsible for the attacks, and very soon the United States will turn its attention to addressing Al Qaeda. Bin Laden wanted to promote an Islamic revolution throughout the world to attack the United States. They had begun, terrorists trained by Al Qaeda had begun entering the United States in 2000 and got flight training and things of that nature, and they're ready for the attack by 2001. So bin Laden is a wealthy Saudi, a member of a wealthy Saudi family. He's Saudi Arabian. He was born in Saudi Arabia, so he's a Saudi Arabian citizen, but he opposed the U.S. Military presence in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War. The United States, or Saudi Arabia, is considered holy land by many Muslims, by Muslims, and basically when U.S. forces went there during the Persian Gulf to repel the attack, Iraq's attack and defend Saudi Arabia against a potential attack from Iraq, many Islamists opposed, fundamentalist Islamists opposed the presence of U.S. troops there. So he develops a terror network known as Al Qaeda. And Al Qaeda actually has roots in another attack on the World Trade Center in 1993, a bombing attack that failed to bring the building down. They also trained attackers that killed American soldiers in Somalia, and also the USS Cole in 2000. We'll talk about that a little more. So Al Qaeda makes a number of threats against the United States. They're connected to the bombing of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Also, they're responsible for the bombing of the USS Cole in 2000. So what you see is there's a increased level of action from al-Qaeda against the United States. Now, President Clinton did launch a missile attack into an al-Qaeda training camp in Afghanistan, and by accounts, barely missed bin Laden. So bin Laden wasn't killed, but there were other opportunities apparently to assassinate and/or arrest bin Laden that weren't taken by U.S. government leading up to the attacks in 2001. Anyway, so terrorists entered the U.S. in 2000, enrolled in flight schools, and learned to fly airplanes. So the U.S. responded to the attack in a major way. We discovered that a group known as the Taliban, which had ruled Afghanistan, it wasn't really the official government, or at least not recognized by the United States, but they governed according to strict Islamic law, and they formed a very close relationship with bin Laden. So President Bush basically put an ultimatum to the Taliban: give up bin Laden or face invasion. It basically said, if you're either with us or against us. Taliban refused, and October 7, 2001, less than a month after the attacks, the United States and Great Britain attacked the Taliban in Afghanistan. And this begins what will become the longest war in American history, the attack on, or one of the longest wars in American history, the conflict in Afghanistan. So U.S. and British troops relied on Afghani fighters known as the Northern Alliance, and these were people that had been part of the fight against the Soviets back in the 80s, and they opposed the Taliban. So by early December, Taliban had been defeated, but bin Laden avoided capture. Even though there was intelligence on where he was at one point, we didn't mobilize quickly enough or effectively enough to get him. So, in addition to the fight of terrorism abroad, there was also steps taken at home to try to address these issues. One of the problems was that information wasn't being shared. So, Bush and the Congress created the Department of Homeland Security. And basically, the Department of Homeland Security was supposed to be over the various different agencies having to do with national security and natural disasters, things like that, and get them all together so we could better process information. There's debates over whether or not that's been effective, but that was the intent of the department. Also, after 9/11, you had anthrax poisoning. The anthrax virus was sent through the mail to specific locations, specifically government offices, buildings, and things of that nature. Didn't have a huge impact, but it did alarm the American people. One of the biggest actions taken by Congress and the White House was the USA Patriot Act. And the Patriot Act was basically a law that broadened the ability of law enforcement to collect information about suspected terrorists. Many critics, though, claimed that it gives law enforcement too much power and poses a threat to basic freedoms like Fourth Amendment rights of freedom against search and seizure and things of that nature. Anyway, so Bush declared a war on terror. Even though the president can't officially declare a war, he's given wide authority by the Congress to fight the war on terror, and he begins to identify Iraq as a possible foe. Basically, after the Gulf War, part of the agreement that was agreed upon is that Iraq would destroy its weapons of mass destruction after the war and allow UN inspectors. Iraq allowed weapons inspectors after 9/11. Basically, Bush insisted that Iraq had failed to account for those weapons, and there were differences in the numbers that were being expected and the numbers of weapons that were known to be possessed by Iraq after the Persian Gulf War in the early 90s. So even though many of our allies advised against going to war, President Bush and his administration insisted Iraq was a threat, and the United States invaded in March 2003. So within a month, Saddam Hussein's regime fell. He was captured later that year, and American forces now had to be there for the rebuilding of Iraq, and basically remained in trying to train a new security force. But terrorist attacks and nation squabbling and civil war kind of led to more involvement than we had anticipated. So no weapons of mass destruction were found, and Bush starts to face increasing criticism. Despite that, he was reelected and made clear that we were going to remain in Iraq for as long as necessary. So it gets extended even further. All right, so Iraq finally ends in 2010 or 11. U.S. forces finally come out. Actually, 09, 2010. Combat forces and then all forces come out of Iraq. So the Iraq War has been ended. Afghanistan is still going on. So we have some other things that we're looking at that are going to pose challenges and in some cases opportunities. America's population is shifting. About 30% of the population right now is made of minorities, either African American, Latino, or other groups. By 2050, population projections show that 50% will be minorities by that time. So, in other words, white Americans will no longer be the majority. They'll still be the largest group, but will no longer be the majority of Americans. And many Americans are kind of resisting and have been pushing back against this idea and this changing demographic. You also have regional changes. The South and the West are growing faster than the North and the Midwest. A lot of that has to do with better climate, better business conditions, lower taxes, and cheaper labor costs, because most southern and western states are what are called right to work, which means they don't have a lot of union jobs. Americans are getting older also. This is because the baby boom is getting older. Those people we talked about born between the end of World War II and kind of the beginning of the Vietnam War. And this is going to affect programs such as Social Security, maybe even more importantly, Medicare, which is the program that provides medical coverage for seniors. Computers, technology has changed things dramatically. Over 60% of Americans own a computer, and that's closer to 70% now. Wireless phone lines finally surpassed the number of landlines in 2005. So, excuse me, now more people have cell phones than have home phones. This causes challenges too for funding things like 911 and stuff like that. These changes have helped business work more efficiently, but there's also caused conflicts as well. Agriculture is changing as well. You have genetic engineering, which makes plants hardier. They can grow faster. They can have bigger yields. And this makes a benefit because food is cheaper and more widely available. But it also has some critics too, because we're not really sure about what the health effects are or what will happen if those genes get into wild plants. It could cause uncontrolled growth and invasive species and things like that. Also, President Bush, he laid out the next goal for exploration, which was the moon, the space station on the moon, and exploration of Mars. But budget deficits since then have kind of put a halt on that. In fact, we shut down the space shuttle program and still aren't and there's no long-term plan to replace it, so we have to figure out what's going to happen with that. Health and health care is a long-term challenge. One of the availability and expense, ability to pay for care has been a problem. Obama and the Congress in 2009 passed the Affordable Care Act, which is supposed to extend health care to more people. And you also have, continuing environmental issues. We're the world's largest consumer of energy, although we're getting ready to be passed by China and even India. And the problem is we want a lot and there isn't a lot, especially when we have to compete with those other countries. Energy costs include pollution, environmental harm, and of course the dependence on foreign oil, which is a problem. So there's a continuing search for cleaner, more sustainable energy sources. Many scientists also say that using those fossil fuels causes environmental disasters and global climate change that lead to things like Katrina, a massive storm that killed 1,000 and displaced thousands more. We'll see.